I wrote for 30 years before I was traditionally published, and I self-published for 10 books over that time. I noticed a lot of people over that time who were good, but I wouldn't have considered them particularly talented. They were a certain person of a certain way, writing about certain subjects, and you immediately got traditionally published or won awards or whatnot, and now they're nowhere. I've seen them come and go endlessly. There's new batches of them every 5 years. There's the latest, and then they're gone because the new ones have come and taken over. And so I wrote for 30 years. There's part of me sometimes I can catch a little bit of bitterness, and part of me goes, "No, that was just my apprenticeship. I had to look like an idiot for 30 years to people who had careers taken off, that they were earning 10 times more than I was. I was turning down promotions so I could spend time at night to write poetry by the train tracks. I was in a corporate job once, and they offered me a position as a creative director. This is in my mid-30s, and that was a massive moment in my life where I thought, I could actually be a normal person, and I could have a better life, and I could make it much easier for myself after struggling for so long. They've recognised that I have a few good sideways thoughts, but I thought, no, I'm not wasting it on them. I'm not wasting my interesting thoughts for this. And I just went from there. And I remember one of the first self-published books I made, called Picture Songs. It was photocopied and stapled. It was like a best of ideas that I'd had over 10 years in my 20s. And I sold it on the street. Then I took it into Readings Carlton bookstore, and they put it on their counter. And they actually sold it on their counter, and I sold like 700 of them. And then that was that. And I thought, in my head, I made it. I'm going to be able to do this for the rest of my life. And then nothing happened. Not nothing happened, but I learned. It's like, you think you're going to make it, and you actually don't. Speaking of which, I'm at Readings Carlton on the 22nd next week. Between 8 and 9, I'm reading from my 2 books, if you want to come. But yeah, well, I was fortunate that Readings, or lucky that they put my little photocopied stapled book. That was back in 2008. And then I self-published continuously over those years, just writing bits and pieces, playing around with cartoons and poetry and trying to work it out, and it was an apprenticeship, and it was hard because I just kept seeing these people just seem to come out of nowhere with their MFAs and PhDs, kick ass and disappear. And some of them are still around. Some of them I talk to occasionally. Yeah, I just kept going, and I saw Insta poetry take off, and I thought, this is beautiful. I know a lot of people would probably be snobby about it, but it appealed to my sensibilities. I bought like some early books of it, and I thought, these guys are doing something interesting that no one else is doing. And so I started following them from there, and I thought, I'd love to be published by them one day. That'd be amazing. And I remember submitting a manuscript to them back in 2020, only 6 years ago. 6 years is a long time also, and that I didn't hear anything, but they get so many manuscripts that it's hard. You just can't read everything. But I did get lucky with Melbourne Uni Press, Five Island Press in 2019. There was a call out for poetry manuscripts, and they picked it up. I was like, I can't believe that. But for them to pick it up, I had to I needed to have a publishing resume for a literature poetry book, and that publishing resume included being published in Best Australian Poems twice back in 2012 and 13. And I only submitted that as a complete joke to myself, because I only started writing, and it was a miracle that they Best Australian Poems took them on. Thought, that's when I made the move from being a cartoonist to going, I'm just going to try this poetry stuff. I like it. And then I submitted to like little competitions and stuff, and maybe 1 or 2% of them were accepted. Probably, yeah. So I must have submitted such a writer cliche, hundreds, and my hit rate was probably about 3%, maybe 5% if I don't know. But yeah, it took a lot of submissions, and I started building this resume of publishing moments, and that's why Five Island Press took my stuff on. But I noticed that sort of academic poetry comes and goes. It all sounds the same. It's basically whatever's current morally fashionable, mixed with certain news, a certain take on news, and then that poetry book is dead in the water just 2 years later because it was whatever was fashionably correct at the time. And my poetry book wasn't not correct. It didn't have politics in it. It didn't have therapy speak in it. Very consciously, I didn't want to have any. I tried not to use dream logic too much, because that's a lot of poetry just feels like crossword brain dream logic with all the emotional nutrient of chewing gum, with MFA stamped on it. And so some of my stuff is a little bit like that, but I love the directness of writers from 60, 70 years ago who just said stuff. Looks like my nose is broken or something, but it's not. Is it the camera? I don't know. I've never seen my nose like that. Yeah, but I thought back to the Insta poetry that I was watching through Andrews McNeil, and how that was something like a cross between cartoon and poetry. And I came from this cartoonist background, something that you could instantly get. But I also felt like I loved Insta poetry, but I also felt like I'd read it and it felt like a sugar high, and then I wouldn't get much more from it than that. But I noticed, like, Bukowski or Henry Miller or Cormac McCarthy could write just a paragraph, and I feel full for days. And I thought, how can you blend that with Insta poetry? And Bukowski's often regarded as the godfather of Insta poetry. Just look at his line breaks. They're exactly the same as what you'd see in most Insta poetry. But I thought, how can I blend? I've had a brush with the literature or establishment, the literary establishment, with Five Island Press Publishing, and so I just kept going. I kept self-publishing my stuff, partly humorous, partly bits. It was cobbled together with humor, poetry, my own random thoughts on life, and I just kept going, and I kept self-publishing. I thought, self-publishing's all right. I like this. I can just do whatever I want, and you can actually find an audience. You don't need gatekeepers. The only gatekeeper out there with social media, there was a meritocracy going on where it wasn't who you are, what you look like, or anything like that. It was how good your work was, or how if it could relate to an audience. Not shoved to them. The audience pulled it to them. It wasn't pushed on the audience like a lot of literary books are, with their award systems, universities, and all that sort of stuff. I went to Melbourne University and did an arts degree, and I read so many books that I was like, I don't ever want to read again. And so it took me a while until to actually find books that I actually liked. That, like, 10 years later in my 30s. And in self-publishing, you didn't need gatekeepers. The only gatekeeper was your head. It was what you would let in or out, because everyone, especially in the last 10 years, somehow the culture has implanted cops in our head of what we can and can't say. It's always been like that, but I've lived enough to know it, especially now. It's even more than ever. Like thought crimes, whatever you say, you could be massively punished for. And so the gatekeeper is in your head. And so you have all the stupid thoughts. You have all the things. I figured if I could think of all the things that I'm not allowed to say, just think them anyway. Just say them to myself. Even though my phone's listening and it'd probably go to jail just for saying random shit. I feel like my brain is like, if a sign says don't step on the grass, I want to step on it because I'm being told not to. I feel like it's a cheeky kid. I'm a natural contrarian. Both my parents were. And so there's part of me that wants to explore everything because I feel like as soon as I cut off, I'm definitely not allowed to say that, then it blocks off stuff that I'm actually allowed to say. I feel like by limiting myself in any way, then it actually blocks off good stuff as well. Sure, we can't say certain stuff because it's going to create war or craziness, and you can't say it. But part of me just wants to say it privately to myself because I know as soon as I block a fist, hold words in a fist that I can never let go and can never see the light of day, it blocks off all the good stuff. And that's what I see in a lot of writing. You can feel that there's no magic in the good stuff. It's kind of tempered and squashed, and it doesn't feel like it's missing life. It's lifeless. Not all of it. I'm not saying mine isn't lifeless as well. I write a lot of lifeless stuff, but I can feel it as soon as I just give myself the permission. I hate permission. I hate therapy talk. But that's the only word I can think of for the moment. But as soon as I let myself just think all the wrong things, I can think even 10 times more right things. So I let myself think all the wrong things, and then I not only think of right things, but 10 times the amount of right things by letting myself think all the wrong things. And so, yeah, the gatekeeper is in your head. That's all I'm trying to say. It's not the literary establishment. It's how ballsy you are. There's some parts in You're Going to Be Okay in my new book where I've made just brash, unqualified statements of what I think with such conviction that I almost sound like a joke, and it sounds almost like an arrogance. But for me, when I read authors who talk like that, I find it funny. Part of me thinks, they know they're a fool, but they're going full into it, and that's the funny stuff. And I love that. And you can read a lot of writing where while you're reading the words, you can tell, even though they're writing interesting stuff and all the right things, you can feel that they're banning themselves from ever thinking a wrong thought. You can feel it in their words, and they're not. It's not a full world. It's like the tip of the iceberg with no roots, and it's just fluff that flies off. And yeah, that's the crap that I can't stand. And when I'm reading their stuff, it almost like it mentally starts putting jail walls up in my head. It's like reading their words where you can feel that they've never had a wrong thought in their life. It starts putting jail walls in my head and limiting my world, my imagination. And so a lot of that for me is it's basically poison, and it's very well disguised poison. It drinks so easily. It's human-made asbestos. But anyway, I don't know where I'm going with this. If you'd like to leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or a comment on YouTube, I'd love it.